Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, so I think what we'll do is get started. It's 6 o'clock. And hopefully this will be an. Sir, Mr. Zimmerman has graciously made himself available to answer questions and also to explain to you where things are from an assessment standpoint on your property vis-a-vis increased values. With us tonight is my assistant, Earl Sims, and then out of the assessor staff, Sarah Siegel and Rochelle McGee. And so with that, I also just want to acknowledge, I understand that our state senator, Doug Beck, is here with us. He's not a panelist, but he is here with us, and I want to thank him for attending. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Zimmerman, and take it away, Jay.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Thank you for spreading the information about this to constituents on your turf. This is the 5th of these town hall meetings that we've done, and I think after this one, we will now officially have covered every county council district, and I'm flattered and appreciative of you taking the time. What I'll do is I'll introduce, you've already acknowledged Sarah Siegel, our external affairs manager, and Rochelle McGee, who is an appraisal supervisor and who in fact is the person who trained me in appraisal fieldwork some years ago. But Sarah is also going to be playing the role of traffic cop tonight, so I'll hand it over to her for the proverbial rules of the road, and then we'll try and get substantive.
Thanks, Jake. Good evening, everyone. Just a couple of things that we want everyone to know so that we can make this run as smooth as possible. The first thing I want to do is remind everyone that this is being recorded, so be mindful of that. Second, to let you know that the best way to ask a question during the meeting tonight is to use the chat box feature. It looks like all of the attendees who are with us, at least so far, are connected through WebEx. So just put your question in the chat box and be happy to read it off. If it's a general question, Assessor Zimmerman can definitely answer it this evening. If it's a question about a specific property that requires some research, we may need to do that research and then get back to you, but we will definitely do that. If you have a question that you would prefer the whole group not see, because the chat box is available to everyone, you are welcome to send us a question to the assessor's mailbox, and that's assessor, ASSESSOR, at stlouisco.com. We won't be able to access that tonight, but again, we will get back to you. And likewise, if you or someone you know, a friend or a neighbor, does not have internet access, you can certainly reach our office by giving us a call at 314-615-4981. The only other thing I need to remind everyone is that we have a hard stop at 7:30 tonight. So if we don't get to everyone, please remember that we will get back to you in the next few days. Thanks. Jake?
Thanks very much, and I'll try to be as brief as I can so that we don't run up close against that hard stop, although as the councilman knows, on my worst days I can be fairly verbose, but I'll do my best to keep that in check, because the purpose here is not for me to blather at the good people of South County. The purpose here is to make ourselves available to answer questions and demystify the assessment process as much as we can. So to that end, a little bit of background about what we do, and some of this may seem a little on the basic side, but I come at it from the perspective of a help us to help you mindset. I find that when folks understand sort of what we do and what we don't do, and what we are empowered to do and where we can't be of help, it's a great deal more useful in terms of engaging with our office and getting a result that is satisfying rather than frustrating for everybody. So the job that you have hired me to do when you elected me to be your assessor is, not to put too fine a point on it, to tell you what your stuff is worth. And more specifically, when I say stuff, I mean the stuff that rolls around on the dirt the dirt itself and the stuff you build on top of the dirt. So the stuff that rolls around is, of course, cars and every once in a while farm equipment, horses, and even airplanes. But most of us don't own a private airplane, and the value of cars is rarely controversial because we have things like a blue book. So the real job that you pay me and a whole bunch of trained appraisers to do is to figure out what the dirt is worth and to figure out what the structures on top of it are worth. More specifically, I am instructed by state law to take a magic snapshot in time on January 1st of an odd numbered year and to pretend that you sold your house or your commercial office building or your restaurant or whatever it may be on January 1st of this year, and then to take my very best guess at what you would have got for it if you'd sold it on exactly January 1st. And obviously, that is a bit of a tricky proposition because you probably didn't sell your home on January 1st. Even if you did sell it, the odds of you selling it on that magic date are vanishingly small. And so our job is to estimate that value as best as we can for every piece of real and personal property in St. Louis County. And just the real property, which means the houses and the businesses and the dirt, that's about 400,000 parcels of property throughout the county. So it is a tall job, and it's an important job for very obvious reasons, to be done right and to be done fairly across the board. So that's what you tell me to do. Now, what's the one word I didn't say anywhere in there? You'd never heard me say the word taxes, right? Now, we all know what's coming at the end of the line here. The school district and the fire department and everybody else who collects property taxes will impose a tax rate based on the value of that stuff. But you don't pay me to do the job of setting those taxes or imposing those taxes or collecting those taxes or even caring that much about whether the school district and their friends make more money or less money in taxes this year. And I want to suggest to you that that's a pretty good piece of public policy, right? If you want to be confident that you can trust me and, more importantly, the nonpartisan professional employees of my office to do the job fairly, you need to know that we don't have a stake in that game. Burchell's salary will not be affected. My budget is not going to go up or down based on whether the Afton School District makes more money or less money in property taxes this year. Ditto the fire department, ditto the special school district, ditto all the other people who collect property taxes. The only job that you pay me to do is to try to fairly estimate what your property is worth and what everybody else's property is worth. And I hammer on that because it's a common source of confusion, right? People show up to our office all the time and say some version of, I don't like my tax bill, I want to challenge my taxes. We don't do the taxes, we do the valuation of the property. And I'll say more later about that whole help us to help you thing. But if you take nothing else away from this conversation, take this away. Our job is to estimate the fair market value of your property, and the thing you want to do when you are checking our work and making sure we got it right is to focus on that core question, which is, have we valued your home for what it really could have sold for on January 1st of this past year? So what does that actually mean? Obviously, the odds are real good you didn't sell your house on January 1st. So in the vast majority of cases, what we are doing is a version of the same thing that your real estate agent would do. If you called up your realtor and you said, all right, it's time to sell, what do you think we can get for it? The first thing that your realtor is going to do is they're going to research other sales in your neighborhood. They're going to look for what they would call comps, comparable sales, which is to say what other properties were advertised for, but more importantly, what they actually sold for on the open market. That is how you estimate the value of property in the vast majority of cases. And I'm going to talk a lot about comps this evening. I'll tell you real briefly, there's a couple of other ways you could do it. To pick an extreme example, if we're not in Afton, but instead we head over to Huntley, where August Bush has his mansion, and as part of the custom construction at his mansion, he has a helicopter pad on the roof. Well, you know, there are no comparable sales because even if a property next door in Huntley happens to have sold, the odds are it didn't have a helicopter pad. There's no other mansion quite like that one. right? So for weirdo properties like that one, and for big commercial office buildings, there are other methods of valuation. I can spend more time talking about them if folks are interested. They involve estimating the rental income and risk that a landlord would see if they owned the property, or in the case of Mr. Bush's mansion, trying to guess what it would cost to rebuild it if the property burned down tomorrow. But I'm not going to go into the weeds on that unless folks really care. For most ordinary people in most neighborhoods throughout St. Louis County, the method of valuation we are using is those comparable sales. And let me just give you a little bit of insight into what they've shown us this year, because I will tell you that over the 10 years now that I've been doing this job, I have seen wide variations in the real estate market in St. Louis County. Some of you will remember 10 years ago when I was first running to be assessor, and I happened to be the first elected one in about 50 years because the voters changed the county charter to start electing the assessor again. And one of the promises I made at the time, and this was in the middle of the foreclosure crisis, this was in the tail end of the worst economic devastation of my lifetime. And there were some parts of St. Louis County, especially less affluent school districts in North County, where you saw the typical property value going down 20%, 30%, 40%. And I ran for office on a very explicit promise that if the value of your property goes down, then the assessment needs to follow. Did that make school district leaders happy? Probably not. There were probably some folks running fire departments who had to make some tough choices because we followed the facts that year. By the same token, I have seen years with wildly appreciating real estate values where the market is red hot, values are going up in some cases through the roof, and sometimes you have very happy school districts and fire departments and taxpayers very concerned, right? But back to what I said before, you don't pay me to put a finger on the scales for any one side. You pay me to try and figure out what the houses are actually selling for. So what's happening? I'll tell you that a year ago, I was scared to death, and I said so very publicly. At the beginning of this terrible pandemic, whatever else it has done to our society and to our community, and God knows there are ways it has brought us together and ways it has torn us apart. But thinking only about my day job, I was terrified as all get out that we were about to see a crash in real estate values, that we were about to see another wave of foreclosures, another wave of people being unable to pay their mortgages, banks seizing houses, owner-occupied homes turning into rental properties. We've lived that nightmare before, and I was afraid it would happen again. There have been our share of nightmares over the past year, but that one, thank God, did not come true. Instead, I am happy to tell you that this has actually been a pretty good year to be a homeowner in St. Louis County. Across the board, rich neighborhoods, less affluent neighborhoods, anywhere in between, homes are on average selling for more than they did last year and more than they did 2 years ago. And for obvious reasons, that's very good news. It means strong neighborhoods. It means appreciating value. It means that what for most people is their biggest investment is becoming worth more. It also means that it's really important for you to check my work. At a time when property values are going up, if we get it wrong, and in particular, if we believe that your home has 3 bedrooms when it really has 2, or we give you credit for an extra fireplace that you don't really have, or an updated kitchen that you don't have, or whatever else it may be, then we'll be wrong about your home. And at a time of appreciating property values, that wrongness will translate into the wrong value, and the wrong value will translate into an unfair tax bill. So what's actually happening with the values across the board? I'll ask Rob if he's available to go ahead and put that map up on the screen so folks can see the picture. But the picture is a really, really interesting one. As I said, homes are selling for more across St. Louis County. But the really interesting thing is that the best kind of home to own, ask any realtor and they'll tell you, the homes that are flying off the market, the ones that you list them for sale and they sell on the first day with multiple offers and bidding wars, are lower value properties, middle class, more affordable homes costing $100,000, $200,000 up to perhaps as much as about $300,000. Those properties are selling like hotcakes. And, you know, don't cry any sad, sad tears for the folks in the $1 million mansions. but the reality is that those simply have not appreciated in value quite as much as more affordable homes. And while Rob is trying to scroll in so that we can actually see the map, well, I'll tell you what you would see if the tech were working. What you would see is that some of the neighborhoods in St. Louis County with more affordably priced homes, you can see those green splotches up in North County, which are places like the Hazelwood School District. And if you look closely, you'll see a tiny green splotch down south. That's the Hancock Place School District. Obviously, there are some big demographic differences between the Hazelwood School District and the Limay area. But what both of those areas have in common is they have relatively modestly priced homes that in many cases, if an older couple moves out of, let's say, the folks buying the home are much more likely to be first-time home buyers. They're much more likely to be folks fixing the place up. You may see infill construction. You may see tear downs. Neighborhoods where that is going on, neighborhoods where people who are getting out of mom and dad's basement and buying that smaller house for the first time, those are the neighborhoods that have been doing the best over the last couple of years in the real estate market. And so, look, like I said, don't weep for the poor folks in Clayton who are only seeing their property values increase a few percent compared with 2 years ago, right? They're doing just fine and they can still sell their homes for a good deal of money. But from the perspective of a homeowner, this is a really, really good time to own a middle-class home in St. Louis County. Now, let me pause for a minute and take off my assessor hat and put on my regional leadership hat, the same one Councilman Tracus wears. And let's just all remember that there's a flip side to this. There's a downside that all of us should be thinking about. And the flip side is that if it's a great time to own that home, that means it's a lousy time if you're trying to be that first-time home buyer. If you're someone still trying to get your piece of the American dream, if you've been renting and you've been trying to save up the money for the down payment and it's hard enough in the middle of a pandemic, the truth of the matter is it's gotten a little bit harder over this last year or so. How much is that about low interest rates and banks lending like they didn't before? How much is it about the pandemic and anybody who can get a home with a backyard, really desperate to do so this last year? And how much of it is just about St. Louis County being a good place to live? I don't know. But there are implications for home building. There are implications for development in this region, and there are implications for how we think about all of the county and not just those privileged parts of the central corridor. If we want to have not just strong neighborhoods, but strong neighborhoods where everybody can afford to get their piece of the pie. Editorial aside, and back to my day job. So what does this all mean for you? Obviously, these numbers are just averages. They're just medians. Everybody's home is different. Individual properties may have gone down in value compared with 2 years ago. Individual neighborhoods may. It all depends on what the homes are actually selling for. But across the board, the typical property is up some. So the most important thing you can do is to take 5 minutes right now, tonight after we're done here, and just go to our website and take a look at the information we have about your property and make sure that it's right. A lot of folks are surprised to see how much data St. Louis County actually has on every piece of real estate in this town. It is the product of the work that our appraisers do day in and day out. We visit literally tens of thousands of properties over the course of the months in a year, and over the course of a reassessment cycle, even more than that. The odds are very good that if not this time around, within the last couple of years, we've physically been to your property. You may not have known it. Depending on the inspection we were doing, we may have knocked on your door and left a card, or we may have simply taken a look from the property line. But if you take a look on our website, you'll see that we've got a sketch of the dimensions of your home. We've got the information on when it was built, when it was last remodeled, what the overall characteristics are, the quality of the construction, the condition of it relative to other properties in the neighborhood, a whole bunch of nuts and bolts kind of information, the sort of thing that appraisers are out there gathering every day. And this is the thing more than anything else that you really want to take a look at. Because if we are wrong about your property, the likeliest reason we are wrong is a good old-fashioned mistake somewhere in that property description or that sketch. We are the government, ladies and gentlemen, and if you think the government is perfect all of the time over the course of 400,000 pieces of property in St. Louis County, then I want to live in the same world you live in. But in this world, we are constantly having to find and correct mistakes, because let's face it, nobody knows your home better than you do. And even in normal times, you probably don't want a government bureaucrat tramping around your home. And particularly in the middle of a pandemic, you really don't want a bureaucrat inside your house. And even if you did want one of us inside of your house, we ain't coming in right now. So you got to take a look and make sure we got it right. If we think that you have more square footage than you really do, if we think that you have a finished basement living area when in reality what it is a flooded laundry room, if we think that your home is in tip-top shape, but in reality you have a leaky roof and an estimate from the contractor that it'll cost $25,000 to fix, please don't assume that we know this. The odds are good that we don't. And back to what I was saying before, help us to help you. This is how we right wrongs. We do this every day, and it's much easier to do it informally. It's much easier to do it in the context of, hey guys, we spotted a mistake. I really think you might want to have an appraiser come out and take a look, or you may want to take a look at these pictures that we've sent you. In ordinary times, in a normal year, starting right about now and heading in through May, we would be conducting literally thousands of those so-called informal conferences with property owners, where folks would be showing up to provide exactly that kind of information and sitting across the table from an appraiser. But no one is sitting across the table from appraisers inside of government buildings right now. And so we've decided to try a pilot project to try and make a little lemonade out of those lemons. And what we are doing instead is simply inviting taxpayers. If you see that we've got something wrong, something that ought to be obvious and straightforward and easy to fix, don't wait until you get a change of assessment notice in the mail. Don't wait for some version of a formal hearing that you'll have to try and figure out how to do on WebEx or over a telephone or what have you. Just give us a call or send us an email with the pictures you would have brought in to show us. And as our appraisers' time permits, we're just having them review them right now, informally, and where it's relatively straightforward to make a change and work with folks, we're just going to do it and cut out all the rest of the process. We're not taking away anybody's right to file an appeal or go through the whole real formal process. We're just creating a new opportunity for folks to skip the rigmarole and, most importantly, skip doing anything that might make people feel unsafe in these times. Do it all by email, do it all by telephone, and see if we can't take care of it. So what's actually helpful? I've already sort of given away the game, right? Which is that you want to take those pictures, you want to show us that the condition of your home is not what we think it is. The other thing that can be very, very helpful to our appraisers, if you think that we valued your home wrong, and you look at it and say, look, you guys got it right. I mean, I really do have a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, and it really is 1,600 square feet, and it really was built in 1962. But Zimmerman, you still say it's selling for $250,000, and I know there's no way on earth I could get 250. My real estate agent told me I'd be lucky to get 212 on a good day. Well, usually if there's a difference between what we think it is worth and what you or your realtor think it would really sell for, the reason we are wrong would be that we have picked the wrong comps, the wrong comparable sales. And so if everything we know about your home is correct and the condition is right and it's not something weird where there's flooding in the neighborhood, then the thing you want to do is you want to take a look at that comp sheet that we have, because for most properties, you will see that we are showing 5 comparable sales, 5 sales of other homes that we think are close by in the neighborhood and at least kind of sort of similar to your home. And that kind of sort of thing, I want to emphasize that, right? Where when you're looking for a good comp, you're not looking for the house that looks exactly like yours. It's not that hard to adjust for the home that has a few hundred square feet. We know if the neighbor house that's sold has a pool and yours doesn't. We know that means yours is worth less than the house that had the pool, right? The most important thing is that the property is at least similar in type and condition and when it was built. And most importantly, that the kids go to the same schools, that it's in the same general neighborhood. The house that looks exactly like yours was built by the same builder, but was built 3 miles away in a different school district. That's not a good comp. The house that was built 10 years earlier than yours and is 500 square feet smaller and is in worse condition, but is 3 houses down from you, that's a good comp, especially if it's sold recently. So again, if it seems like we've gotten it wrong, the likeliest reason, if it's not that we're wrong about the condition, is that we picked the wrong comps. We picked something that's close by, but it's actually in a different district or it's in a different neighborhood. I had a situation in my parents' neighborhood some years ago where an old neighbor called me trying to figure out why something crazy had happened to his value. The crazy thing that had happened was we had chosen a comparable sale in the form of a property that was literally half a block away from him. But it was half a block on the other side of a big street, and all the houses on the other side of the big street were giant multi-million-dollar mansions. He doesn't live in a multi-million-dollar mansion. The correct comp would have been literally any property a mile in the other direction. And you can see where the mistake happened, right? That's the kind of thing where it takes human beings looking at it. And the human beings in my office are appraisers. They're trained to do this. They're trained to see when we've got a wonky comp sheet. They're trained to look at the information that you share because nobody knows the value, or excuse me, nobody knows the condition of your home and what it really looks like better than you do. One quick word to avoid frustration when you communicate with the folks in our office. This may sound obvious, but I gotta say it again because it always frustrates somebody every year. A comp is a comparable sale. It is a property that's sold on the open market in a transaction between two people who weren't related to each other. Nobody was a bank. Nobody was buying it on the courthouse steps. Everybody had a realtor or a lawyer representing them, and everybody had a fair opportunity to make an offer on the property. That is a comparable sale. Sometimes there's always one person who shows up and says, Zimmerman, you are being so unfair to me. Look at this. You got my house on for $150,000, but look at these 5 comps. My neighbor is 132, and this neighbor is 121, and this neighbor is 108, and that's not fair. My staff can be sympathetic when they see something like that. They can say, you may very well be right. This may not be fair, but you haven't given them real estate evidence. You haven't given them comparable sales. All you've given them is the assessor's estimate of value of a bunch of properties. And even if you're right that something unfair is happening there, it's impossible to know from that if the issue is that the value is too high on one property or that the value is too low on another one. The way that you help appraisers who are trained to value properties see what the correct value of yours is to find the actual properties that sold on the open market. So this is what we do. And again, I really want to stress to folks, look, there is a formalized process if you disagree with us. And the good news about that process is that it involves a board of equalization. The members of the board of equalization don't work for me. They are not appointed by me. They're appointed by the county executive. And they answer only to him, just as I answer only to you, the people who elected me. This is good. It is healthy. You want there to be an independent check. So nothing stops anyone from going through that process. Everyone in town will get a change of assessment notice in the mail in the weeks and months ahead that will let everyone know what we think their property is worth, right? And that triggers the opportunity to file those appeals. We will surely see thousands of taxpayers over the course of the summer and into the late summer months. We do this every 2 years. We're going to do it again this time around. And while it may be in a format like this, or folks may need to call in and do it by telephone, we're still going to make sure everybody gets heard. But what I really, really stress, look, everybody this evening, you clearly are not the ordinary citizen because you just voluntarily sat through a half an hour of your life on a WebEx town hall meeting talking about property assessments, right? So I already know that you care a little more and you're a little more sophisticated than the average bear on the subject of county real estate. But there's somebody you know who isn't. There's a family member, a senior citizen on a fixed income who is worried to death about being taxed out of their home. There's somebody you know who lives down the street who could be in a real bind this year if we get it wrong. And too often that person doesn't realize it. They throw out that change of assessment notice when it comes in the mail. They don't pay attention to this stuff. They wait until that tax bill comes in December, and then it's too late. Then I don't have any power under the law to do anything to be helpful. So this is my charge, my request, my plea to you. After you take that 5 minutes to look up your property on our website and make sure that we got it right, the next thing you can do is you can find that senior citizen, that family member, that friend, that person who needs it. And you can walk them through it. And if they don't have internet access, you can give them the phone number so they can give us a call and we can walk them through it. And just take a quick look and make sure we don't have something royally messed up, because it's easy to fix those kinds of things right now. It's tricky, especially for that less sophisticated or just plain busy person, to do it in the context of an appeal hearing in July, and it's impossible to do it in November. This is the time, and so I'm asking everybody who is listening in here right now, not just for yourselves, don't wait till it's too late, but spread the word. Let folks in the community know. This is the job you pay us to do. You pay us to try and accurately estimate what property can sell for. And let me be clear, there will always be people, especially sophisticated commercial property owners, who will try to game the system, who will try to get a sweet deal that they don't deserve, who will try and get their value lowered below what the property is really worth because they know it'll get them a tax break. I have seen it all in my time in this office. I have seen strip mall owners in West County pretending to be farmers, throwing winter wheat seeds on the median at the PF Chang's and claiming it was a farm to get a tax break. I have seen highly profitable businesses pretending to be charities seeking to get a tax exemption. I have seen people wealthy beyond imagination trying to hide their private airplanes, pretending that they were really based in Illinois to avoid paying taxes. You name it, I've seen it. And they sound like different stories, but they're all really the same, right? They're all somebody thinking that they can try and get themselves a little deal, and what's the harm in that? But the harm in that ought to be pretty obvious, right? Take the biggest of the fake charities, for example. Had the biggest of the fake charities gotten away with what they wanted to do, they would have gotten a tax exemption that would have saved, let's call it about $1 million a year just in payments to the Kirkwood School District alone. So what happens if the Kirkwood School District suddenly loses $1 million in property taxes from that one entity? Well, they got two choices. They can either lay off a bunch of teachers or close buildings or do whatever they need to do to save $1 million, or they can raise taxes by $1 million on every other man, woman, child, and small business in Kirkwood to compensate. And I'll leave it as an exercise for the listener what you think they might have done. But the bottom line is that fairness demands. If you want me to look you in the eye and say we're committed to fairness and our appraisers are trying to value your property for what it's really worth, then the other job you pay me to do is to stand up to those guys. No matter how good their lawyers are, no matter how difficult the tax representatives make our lives. And I think the councilman could tell you as much as I can that the tax representatives aren't shy about yelling and screaming if they think anyone's coming after their business model. But the bottom line is that all of us are paid by you to do a job, and we need to do that job fairly, and we need to do it without too much concern for whose ox gets gored, but with a whole lot of concern for making sure that we are actually valuing properties for what they really could have sold for on January 1st. In other words, to do our job under the law. That's what we are here for. That is why we work for you. That's why we're here tonight. And as promised, I think I have gone on quite long enough. So let's open it up for questions. Hopefully, I think we've had some submitted already. And Sarah will remind everyone how to submit questions in the chat box or otherwise, if you like.
Thanks, Jake. So to use the chat box, all you have to do is, if you're online, all you have to do is just click that chat box button, go on in there and let us have your question. And I'll be happy to read it out. You can also use a Q&A feature, although I'd ask you to try to stick with the chat box if you can. It's just a little easier to pick up those questions. We did have a question come in this afternoon, Jake, that I'd like to ask you to address. and I believe the gentleman who sent it in is on the call tonight. This gentleman wanted to know the relationship between the economic impact of COVID and values this year, particularly increases this year.
Sure. It's a great question because it's not at all what I expected to see happen. We follow the market. We follow the same thing that real estate agents are following, seeing what properties are selling for. But honestly, I really expected that sales were gonna fall. I expected that folks would be mighty shy about selling homes during a pandemic time. And I was scared to death about people losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods, and not being able to afford to stay in their homes. This pandemic has done a lot of screwy things to the economy beyond the many and terrible impacts that it's had in the community. The place where you really see examples of that is with commercial real estate. Whether this is a good time or a bad time to own a piece of dirt, it has a lot to do with what's sitting on top of that piece of dirt. By and large, this is not a great time to own small retail establishments. It is not a great time to own a restaurant, but it's a pretty good time to own a McDonald's sitting on a well-traveled corner with a busy drive-through. It's not necessarily a great time to own office space, but if your business is wrapped up in owning industrial space, in owning warehouses, well, other people are hurting, but if you own the warehouse, you probably had a pretty good year in business, right? And I don't think any of us knows, as the world recovers from this pandemic, and say a little prayer that it happens sooner than later, and that the restrictions on our lives and our safety are all going to go away and not come back. And I know that all of us across many segments of the divide in this region, in this country, believe that strongly, right? But I think none of us has a crystal ball, and none of us knows which sectors of the economy are going to do great or not so great. What I can say is that when it comes to residential home values, which is what I think most folks in St. Louis County care the most about in terms of our work, it's incredibly good news to see that people are still getting fair prices for their homes. And I hope that that continues, because in parts of this community, especially hard hit parts of North County during the last economic crisis, but parts of South County too, we saw wide variation. We saw the falling tide did not carry all boats evenly. So to live in a time when everybody is still able to get a fair price for their home, that's very good news. But to the caller's specific question, the impact of COVID, I mean, that may have direct consequences for school districts or fire departments, right? There are, for example, many school districts that went to the voters this past election asking for tax levies or bond issues, and in some cases that may have been directly related to their costs of virtual education, right? So if somebody is raising taxes because they're spending more money on iPads, then you'd want to ask the folks at the school board about that. But in terms of the work that we do, in terms of the value of the properties, we're doing the same thing that we would do pandemic or no pandemic, which is we're trying to figure out what the homes have sold for.
Another question, Jake, that asked to speak to is the question of whether it's true that taxes automatically go up when values go up.
Oh, that's a great question, and I'm glad it was asked, because that's always a source of confusion. And I could put everybody to sleep right now with an extended discourse on something called the Hancock Amendment. And if you can't find your Nitol tonight and you need some help getting to bed, pull out a copy of the Missouri statutes and read up on Hancock. But in lieu of putting you to bed, the quick summary is this: Missouri has something called the Hancock Amendment, and the Hancock Amendment is a rule that says for those taxing districts, for the school districts, for the fire departments, and everybody else, there's no free money. If you want to get more money, you have to ask permission of the voters. And I'm simplifying this dramatically, but here's more or less how it works. Let's say that I go crazy tomorrow and I say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have a property assessment party this year. And what I'm going to do in the Melville School District is I'm going to just double the value of every property in Melville. Okay, so if you thought your house could sell for $100,000, well, congratulations. Jake just said it's worth $200,000, and I do that across the board. So you would think that, number one, there'd be a whole lot of hacked off people living in the Melville School District. But number two, you might think, well, there'd be a very happy school superintendent, saying, wow, I'm rolling in the dough. I'm going to double my money. But the truth is that wouldn't happen. In fact, that school superintendent wouldn't have any reason to be happy because, and again, I'm oversimplifying, but basically the way it works is that, let's say there's $100 million worth of stuff in the Melville School District, and let's say that their tax rate is 2%. So they really are making $2 million a year. So now I've doubled all the values and we're pretending that there's $200 million worth of stuff in Melville. Well, the Melville School District is required by the Hancock Amendment to either cut their tax rate in half or go ask you for permission to raise more money. So absent a vote of the people, more or less what will happen is Melville would have to cut their tax rate in half so they make the same $2 million next year. So there's no free lunch for the folks who take a bite out of your pocket in property taxes, which is a good and healthy piece of public policy. But what it means for you is that if the value of your property went up compared with 2 years ago, that does not necessarily mean that your taxes will go up. They could very easily go down. Take what I said before about the Hancock Place School District in Lee May, where the typical property is worth 15% more than it was 2 years ago because those properties really are selling like hotcakes. Well, if you happen to live in a home that's only gone up in value by, let's say, 10% compared with 2 years ago, you may very well see a tax decrease this time around. And of course, the flip side can happen in situations where the school district or the fire department or what have you has done that bond issue, has raised taxes, you voted for it in April and forgot about it. I get that question sometimes. Someone says, Zimmerman, you jerk. You promised you'd be fair to me and you lowered the value of my property, but then my taxes went up, you dirty scoundrel. Well, someone might be a scoundrel in that story, but I am not the scoundrel. And if you think someone is a scoundrel, you may want to go talk to the school board or whoever it was that sought that tax increase. But again, what it comes back to is I don't control whether you do or don't vote for that property tax increase this year from the school bond issue or whatever else. What I do control is valuing your home for what it can actually sell for. And if you want to be assured that you are being treated fairly relative to your neighbors and that you are only being asked to pay your fair share of whatever the fire department is taking from everybody this year, it's really, really important to make sure that we've got the information right about your property because that's the piece of it that we control.
A question just came in the chat box on a different subject, well-related subject. The writer wrote, what criteria determines a, quote, good school district, and how does that affect property value? For example, a home in Lindbergh is higher than a home in Melville.
That is an excellent question, and some of it goes into real estate psychology, and you may be better off talking to your friendly neighborhood realtor, right? Yeah, why is Lindbergh, quote unquote, more desirable? Why are some parts of the Parkway School District, higher value in terms of selling a piece of property in? You would have to ask the folks who choose to buy and sell homes in those districts. But our job is to follow the money, so to speak. Our job is to figure out what those properties are actually selling for, rather than to inquire too closely about why it is, because it's not our job to speculate on that. It's our job to try and figure out what's actually happening. But since we have Burchell with us, and since Burchell is actually a sophisticated appraiser while I play one on TV, I wonder if Burchell might want to talk, since the questioner specifically asked about the differences between the Lindbergh and the Melville School District. If you can sort of give us maybe some sense or some examples of how and why it is that the real estate market works that way, and how you can get a feel for how values are likely to change between similar but not identical districts.
Well, looking at her question, speaking about the criteria to determine a good school district, like he said, that doesn't fall under our realm, but just for your reference, you might check DESE, the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and it breaks down the school districts on each level, pre-K, elementary, middle school, and high school, and lets you know how much those districts spend per student. That has nothing to do with our department. I just happen to know that. But and then you can look and see what those schools invest in the students and the different opportunities that the kids have. So if in Melville they offer 10 programs, but in the Lindbergh School District they may offer 15, then people may pay more to be within those boundaries so their kids can have more. And so they'll pay. And I know some people do the same, even with non-public schools, with Catholic schools. People want their kids to be in a certain parish, so they will pay more to be in that area. So depends on the person. Like you said, we'll check with your real estate agent. So when you're looking for something specific for you, you're going to pay what you feel it's worth. And like I said, if Lindbergh has more options to offer your child, people are willing to pay more for those properties. And they also have a good sense of ownership. They're proud to be in there. They're proud that their kids go there. They're proud to support what's going on there, and they want to keep the values up. Whereas in some districts that are failing or losing out on money, or kids are bussed out to other areas, there may not be as much of a sense of ownership, and then those neighborhoods start to decline. So it's kind of it's a big picture, and it's bigger than us. So I would check and see what's offered and see what those schools are doing. But the DESE site is a good tool, and it kind of can build a relationship between what's going on and what you see in the real estate market.
And then the other thing that I think I might just tag on that to add is to remember that the quote unquote quality of the education being provided or desirability of the school district doesn't always track in what seems like a logical way with the amount of taxes that are charged or the relative cost of sending a kid to school in that school district. And to pick one of the more interesting examples that I think tells the tale in St. Louis County is the example of the difference between the Webster and the Kirkwood school district. You know, the Webster and the Kirkwood school districts are both quality districts. They're both places that you'd feel pretty good about sending your kids to school. But if you drive across the city line from Kirkwood to Webster, you will find that the Webster school district has a significantly higher property tax rate. So if you own a $250,000 house in Webster, you will pay a couple $1,000s more in property taxes every year to send your kid to Webster schools than if you owned a $250,000 house in the Kirkwood school district. So why is that? It's not that the Webster school district is, twice as good and therefore twice as expensive as the Kirkwood school district. That's silly. What's actually going on is that Kirkwood has a bunch of big box stores, while Webster has chosen to preserve some of those leafy tree-lined neighborhoods, and their city council has been less welcoming to big commercial development. And a consequence of that is that Kirkwood then is in a position where they can impose a commercial property tax rate on all of that commercial development, and they bring in more money from that, and that lets them get away with a lower property tax rate. Similarly, I see that one of our attendees this evening is my friend Dr. Carl from the Hancock Place School District. And I can tell you that Dr. Carl cares a lot about what's happening to the values of property in Lime, but Dr. Carl also cares deeply and passionately about whether the good people at the River City Casino continue to pay their property taxes and continue to stay in business this year and the next and the year after that. Because if folks ever stop gambling at the boat, then he's going to have a very unpleasant message for the good people of Lime. So every school district is different, and sometimes where the money comes from is uniquely a factor of what's going on there. But again, moving away from the tax rates and moving to the job we do, which is figuring out what the homes are selling for, in some sense, the market is telling us that, and it's not our job to guess which school we think is better or not. It's our job to look at what the homes sell for. Sarah, I think you are muted.
I'm sorry. One thing that you touched on a little bit before is that increases in property values are good for a lot of people, but they also are make life hard for a lot of people. And I was wondering if you could comment, this has been asked in other town hall meetings, on the situation that folks on fixed incomes and seniors might find themselves in this environment.
Yep. It's the most heartbreaking thing we see, and it's the reason why I really stress to everybody here tonight, right? You may not be that senior citizen, but you know someone who is. And if you can encourage them to do a little bit of checking our work now, you may be able to save someone something devastating at the end of the year. But it is also true that there is only so many tools that we are given by the state of Missouri to help here. And here I need to take off my assessor hat, and I need to put back on my guy who cares about public policy and who cares about this region hat. And let me just editorialize for a moment. And I'm going to be very clear that I am editorializing. I'm not now speaking as your county employee, the assessor. This is just Jake talking. It is outrageous that we live in a state where senior citizens who worked hard and played by the rules all their lives can be taxed out of their homes. It is unacceptable in a civilized society. No one, let alone a person in that situation, should face the risk of being taxed out of their home. Other states have solved this problem. It is not that hard to solve. It doesn't cost that much in terms of resources and a change in the law to simply let folks defer those property tax payments until the day they actually sell the house. The state of Oregon did this years ago. I proposed the legislation when I was in the legislature over 14 years ago now, and it still hasn't happened. But worse than that, the folks in the state legislature some years ago, in the name of saving money, cut something called the homestead credit. And they've also been more restrictive on something else called the circuit breaker. And if we just strengthened the circuit breaker and brought back the homestead credit, there would be a lot more help out there for folks in that position, and specifically for those senior citizens on a fixed income who see a situation where, look, it may be great news that their home is going to be worth more money when they sell it, but they're not planning to sell it. What they want to do is stay in their home. And what they see is that their income stays the same year after year after year while the taxes keep going up. So if you feel like I do that that's unacceptable, then I would strongly encourage you to contact your state legislators, let them know how you feel, ask them to bring back the homestead credit, ask them to do right by people who have paved the way for us and have played by the rules along the way. Ending my editorial comment and putting back on my assessor hat, I want to come back to the help us to help you thing, right? If you come and you sit across the table from Burchell, or in times like these, you sit across the WebEx or the telephone cord from Burchell, and you say, "You're breaking my heart. I don't think I can afford to pay this tax bill. I'm scared about losing my home." You can make her cry. In non-COVID times, you could get her to give you a hug, but you haven't given her anything that allows her to help you. Burchell is an appraiser. Her job is to value and figure out what your property could sell for. The way you help that senior citizen on the fixed income, other than putting them in touch with the state and finding the circuit breaker and other resources that are available to help them, is you figure out what we've done wrong in terms of valuing the property so that you give us the tools to get the value right.
Thank you. I want to take a minute to remind everyone that if you have questions, to please feel free to use the chat box, or you can definitely contact our office either by email at assessor@stlouisco.com or by phone at 314-615-4981. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. I would look to Jake, to you, and also to Councilman Tracus to see if there's anything else we need to touch on tonight.
I'd welcome if the councilman has heard any other questions or concerns from folks in the community. Obviously, this is a little different than 2 years ago when folks were really beating down our door. But councilman, if you've heard other questions that you think we should respond to, we're all ears.
No, Jay, I can't say that I have, other than just a general sort of, concern's too strong a word, a general sort of inquiry about what may happen with respect to the health of the real estate market. And you've touched on that already. The other thing I do want to echo, though, and I agree with you, Jay, with respect to deferring tax payments for senior citizens, that everyone should contact their state representative, their state senators, and advocate for that change. There's no reason, no rational reason that Missouri has not done that yet. So I'm with you on that, a big proponent of it. I think that's the equitable thing to do. And the state doesn't, and no one loses any money out of it. It's deferred.
That's exactly right. Yeah. A number of the really good substantive solutions here really cost pennies on the dollar. And unfortunately, it's some of the same old political divides in Jefferson City that hold us back on this, but it needn't be the case. I mean, obviously the councilman and I come from different political parties, right? But it's not that hard for us to agree on this because it's the right thing for the people. Absolutely. And I would like to think that if a Democrat and a Republican can read out of the same hymn book here, it shouldn't be that hard to do 100 miles away in mid-Missouri.
You would think. The only other thing I have, Sarah, is I did on the chat box put my phone number and email address. If anybody has a question that they didn't get to tonight or occurs to them tomorrow, you're always free to call my office or email me. I'll pass it on to Jake and we'll get it answered for you.
Great. Thank you.
On that note, since I don't think we've had any further questions come in, I'll just say one more time that email address is assessor@stlewisco.com. Don't be shy about reaching out to us if you have individual questions or something to do with your specific property that you didn't feel comfortable sticking in a chat box here tonight. I want to thank Councilman Tracus for once again helping make sure that we get the opportunity to share information with the public as widely out there as possible. We have recorded this session so that you can refer other folks to it who might find it helpful to see down the road. And again, I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us this evening.
Yep, and I want to thank you, Jake, for making the time and being so forthcoming. So appreciate it very much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.